Mr. Speaker, I had not originally intended to intervene in this debate and speak, but a number of Clementi residents had been sharing about the timeliness of this motion, and I feel I should just share a couple of perspectives. I will speak today about the consumer protection angle to scams, and secondly, more broadly, on the landscape in the age of AI and Singapore's survivability. Firstly, on the issue of scams, there is, I would say, agreement on all sides of the House that it is a serious issue, especially in the era of digital banking, where senior citizens who grew up in a world of face-to-face counter transactions now can have their bank accounts, life savings depleted at the click of a device by a scammer far away outside of Singapore. And so this is a serious issue, especially in societies such as Singapore, where we progressed rapidly from third world to first, and seniors growing up in the pre-digital era today exist in a world of digital access and digital technology. So that's the first point about consumer protection. So even as members on both sides of the House call for additional measures to scrutinize how banks treat their customers, I would like to once again call upon the MAS and the relevant authorities to call upon and make the point I've raised previously in this House on multiple occasions, which is that there needs to be a consumer protection approach to scams involving banking customers who get scammed out of their savings online. In recent times, there have been efforts by the MAS, the so-called, initially called the risk-sharing framework or risk allocation framework, depending on how commentators look at it. But the key point has to be this: the norms that we approach consumer safety in banking with, the approach to consumer safety for banking should not be too different from consumer safety in other more tangible areas of the marketplace. As I shared to the MOS from MAS not too long ago, if today a company had a consumer product, and if somebody could be tricked by a stranger into configuring that product wrongly so that there was either bodily harm or damage to property, resulting in the loss of someone's entire life savings, we know what the consumer protection approach would be. We see that with vehicles, where if there's a design flaw in a vehicle that predisposes to human error or catastrophic outcomes of human error, that vehicle has a recall. That manufacturer is dealt with in a very serious way. Yesterday, in a question to the Minister for Communications and Information, a written question on operating systems, what was quite notable was that a certain operating system accounted for virtually all of the online banking scams made known to the police, while a certain different operating system did not figure very much in the figures reported in that parliamentary written answer. So again, we see quite a different situation between these consumer products. And once again, I call upon this government to take a consumer protection focus and making sure that manufacturers, as well as service providers, including financial institutions, are held accountable in a way that's not too different from other sectors of society. If your family owns a car and there's a design issue leading to bodily harm, loss of your life savings, you know what the manufacturer must do. If there's a home appliance in your kitchen and someone can trick you into pressing the wrong button so that someone's injured and loses their life savings along the way, you know what the approach will be when it comes to that home appliance. And so I call upon this government, MAS, and the other agencies to take a hard look at the financial institutions and banks and ask, are the banks and telcos and technology firms shouldering enough responsibility in the digital world that tangible goods providers shoulder in the physical world? So that's the first part of my speech, Mr. Speaker. The second part of my speech will be on the age of AI and what Singapore needs to do to adapt. I spoke on this last year during the debate on the President's address early last year. I spoke on the age of AI, and it was a humbling moment because after the speech was delivered and it got a little bit of viral traction online, I think just a little bit over 100,000 people around the world watched it, not that many, but we started getting emails, messages from people around the world. Someone from the USA wrote to me, someone from Africa wrote in as well, and it touched a chord. But this is not about that speech. It is about what Singapore represents to the world. When people see our parliamentarians, whether our ministers, office holders, whether our backbenchers of various persuasions, looking to the future about what the world will be like, people look at what Singapore's thinking about, and they want us to try and find a way forward as well. And so on the issue of AI and the issue of deep fakes, I have a few suggestions as well for the government to consider. Some I've put forward before in parliamentary questions and in my speeches, but let me just reiterate again. The issue of deep fakes is going to be a serious matter for democracies around the world. Because if we can no longer discern easily what is real and not real, you can't even have a functioning democracy. No government, regardless of which political party they come from, will be able to govern in any country without that fundamental basis for deliberative democratic discussion. And so that means, as a society, we need to deal with this preemptively. The Prime Minister, not too long ago, in a Facebook post, talked about how there was a deep fake of him trying to sell certain investment products, a fake video. But that's just deep fake 1.0. Project that forward 3, 5 years, 10 years with more computing power, you can imagine how authentic those deep fakes are going to be. And therefore, as a society and as a government, we must not shy away from moving preemptively to address the issue of deep fakes. I've called upon this government to look at ways of electronically watermarking content, so-called proof of human, whether it is proof of human when someone transacts with an AI bot, with a tech firm online that may be giving answers by AI. But the broader point is that we need ways to confirm that the content is real and is a human. We also need to continue moving upstream, a point which I made to the Education Minister yesterday in question time. From young, we will have to continue training and teaching and bringing up our young Singaporeans, our children and grandchildren, to be even more aware of deep fakes and how subtle they can be. In short, as I was chatting with a young Clementi friend not too long ago, this young Clementi friend was sharing about their worry about deep fakes, saying, look, some of these look a bit suspicious. But the whole point is, the first step is to have that healthy skepticism to sense when something might be a bit sus, to sense while at the same time not losing faith in society being able to move forward. It's of course a whole of government effort. There need to be many ways to look at it: education, regulation, social norms, making sure tech firms are held accountable as well. But we need to move on this very quickly, because by the time the genie is completely out of the bottle, the horse has bolted, it's much harder to rebuild these norms and reconstruct the democratic process in our society. So in summary, Mr. Speaker, just 2 key points, but fundamentally about seeing through the eyes of our people. The first, seeing through the eyes of our consumers and making sure that firms in the digital space and in the financial sector, retail banking services, they treat consumer protection the same way online as we would treat consumer protection for an offline, tangible product in the home, around the home. And secondly, likewise, seeing through the eyes of our people in a world where we have to cope with deepfakes, training, educating our people to see better so that we can safeguard this very precious idea that is Singapore in a world that is continually being disrupted by AI. One last point I wanted to make is that we need to double down our investments in AI capability in our government and in our industry as well. There's been mention of the AI roadmap version 2.0, but sometimes let us also ask ourselves, can we have even higher levels of ambition? From public domain information, if I recall correctly, not too long ago, I think less than a decade ago, Microsoft pumped $1 billion investment into OpenAI. It seemed like a big amount then, but in hindsight, it seems like it was quite a good deal at the time, given what OpenAI grew into. And this also links to a point I made a few years back during a budget debate. Sometimes when we invest ahead of the market, invest in certain technological capabilities which may seem tenuous today, but which could have high yields tomorrow, it means that we are able to get those dividends later on. Many of the big tech firms today, whether Apple, Google, Meta, back then known as Facebook, would not have seemed sure bet investments in their very early years. But those who were willing to make those bets yielded substantial dividends and today are tech powerhouses. So let's think about that as we move into the next phase of AI, the next phase of tech in the digital world for Singapore. What investments can we bet on that may seem tenuous today, but which could put Singapore in a position to be a world power of such capabilities in years ahead? Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your indulgence in allowing me to speak. Thank you very much. I stand in support of the motion by Ms. Tin Pei Ling. Thank you.